welcome back to Control Room and welcome back to winter. Okay, if you haven't been outside, you may not want to go outside. You may want to stay in tonight and enjoy Control Room. I'm Joe Pasevich. I have a guest tonight, Christine Hill, DuxburySubstack.com. You want to read Christine's material. We are so lucky to have a professional, engaged, thorough, I don't know, whatever word, I didn't bring my thesaurus, journalist right in our backyard covering local issues, something we have never had before with all the work we've done here on cable TV. And even in the days when we had some coverage through the Marshfield Reporter and the Marshfield Mariner, and we had people like Lydia Mulvaney and Catherine Cook, you know, all that, we never had a Christine Hill, and you need to go to DuxburySubstack.com to find out what's going on in Duxbury and Marshfield and how it radiates out and radiates in, I could say, or converges in. The state is coming down on Duxbury. The state is putting pressure on the towns and cities to comply with a statewide plan. Okay, does it sound like a conspiracy theory? Well, it probably is. But Christine Hill is going to elaborate on some of the key issues in a few minutes. Right now, I want to remind people that town meeting is June the 2nd, Monday. Okay, a week from this coming Monday. Memorial Day is this Monday, and then the week after that, we will reconvene town meeting at the high school at 7 p.m. We're going to talk, I guess, principally about the budget. Isn't it funny that some articles that were on the warrant are now gone? I think that the dog park solar panel project is, I think, gone for good now, or at least for the foreseeable future. It's just gone. How did that happen? How did it happen? Oh, and by the way, I just want to make mention that we do have another guest just arriving at the studio, to great fanfare and trumpetry you may not have heard. It's our own Amy Troup. I shouldn't say our own. I'm being too greedy, and you know. Amy belongs to the community, and Amy is. What are you? How would you describe yourself, Amy? Are you a Paul Revere, or what are you? I know you're related to John Adams.
Yes, I am.
I mean, again, a relative of John Adams right here. There she is, Amy Troup from Halifax, member of the Halifax Planning Board.
I think she's victorious, is how she wants to describe herself.
The victorious Amy Troup. Although we're going to get into victories and lack of victories that occurred this past weekend, but that's coming up in a minute. But before I dig into all that, the Control Room hotline is activated, so if you have a Control Room hotline membership, you can call the Control Room hotline. But first, I want to mention a couple of quick things. We were hoping to have Ken Sweezy on, and I guess it's not looking too good. Ken's dedicated.
He's stuck in session.
He's stuck in session. Is it? Well, at least he's there.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you hear about these sessions that go on, and there's lawmakers that don't show up, you know, that aren't keeping an eye on things. Ken has jumped into it with both feet, and I think, isn't he hold the record now for the most legislation proposed by a freshman legislator?
He also has another record. He got the most Democratic votes of any amendment recently on the budget.
Wow.
On one of the budget amendments, and it was like 5. But he did get 5 Democrats to switch over to his amendment.
The good news is
I want to know who they are.
The good news, he set a record. The bad news is, you know, there's not much of a record to beat. But he's got dozens and dozens of pieces of legislation that he's sponsoring or written or co-sponsoring. And some of the stuff reads like in support of the Bill of Rights. I mean, it's like real basic good stuff, you know? So I got to give Ken credit. Even though we rib him and we tease him a little bit on this show from time to time, we're still grateful that he's there. And it's not, he's not a MAGA Trump, you know, we don't want to go there. We're not about that. We are about transparency and participation in getting you involved, and Amy, getting people to
town meeting.
Town meeting, exactly.
It takes a lot less time to go to town meeting than it does to complain the rest of the year. Or, now let me add, work to pay the taxes that just went up.
Yep. So you're buying yourself free time, and you're buying yourself extra goods and you're accelerating your new car by going to town meeting. All these things are what's happening. You're improving your health. You're reducing anxiety. You're having more babies. You're buying a new couch. I mean, all these things magically come down from manna from heaven if you freaking go to town meeting. I mean, am I exaggerating?
No, well,
I'm
no,
not.
but some people do get a lot of stress from it.
I know. Well, that's true. But as long as you go there and you have friends there, you're not going to punch somebody in the nose. You're going to leave with a good feeling, and you're going to leave with hope in your heart. I want to mention something else that just came across to me today. We all know Diana DiZoglio.
Yoo-hoo! Another
All right.
Democrat.
Another Democrat who's starting to see the light possibly. She's actually making the rounds right now. What do you think is up with that? Okay.
Oh, we're hoping she runs for governor.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
That would be very fun. I don't know if I'd vote for her, but I'd like to see her run and steer the debate. She is the state auditor, and guess what the state auditor just did? There she is right there. She's a lovely lady, okay, very, very lovely lady, and she's a rising star, let's put it that way. Her office just issued a report, Diana DiZoglio, May 20th. You can go on the state auditor's website. She issued a report on the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, EOHLC, used to be called the DHCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development. Now they oversee housing authorities. They also are the main force behind pushing MBTA zoning, all right? But I just want you to think, Diana DiZoglio did a study of how they are handling. It's called the performance audit of the EOHLC on how they are handling the homeless and migrant crisis, okay? This is a peek into an audit into how they're handling that. Now, first, before I say anything about it, I just want you to think about the EOHLC. Imagine a government agency called the Executive, that's the top, Office of Housing and Livable Communities. Now, what is more basic to everybody than food, water, shelter, right? And living in the community, being safe, not being shot at, not being chased down, not being burglarized, murdered, whatever. It's this agency on Cambridge Street in Boston. It's like trying to get into Fort Knox. I've been there, okay? The security is multi-layered. You can't talk to anybody. There's all kinds of, well, anyway, I'm not going to get into the details. Imagine what an agency with that kind of a name, what would if you saw like the Department of Environmental Protection, okay, they do environmental protection, but something with a title like that, basically, you would think could be in every aspect of your life. Every aspect of your life, right there. And I think in some ways they are. That's kind of scary. And I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist, spook you or anything like that, but this agency has low oversight and low visibility, but enormous power and control. Like I said, that they really shouldn't have. There needs to be oversight of something like this. If they're the ones pushing MBTA zoning, which is the most far-reaching, consequential, controlling, manipulative, whatever you want to call it, it has the potential to just completely transform this state and how we think of housing and real estate and property rights and everything. That's the kind of power that is built into this. It's no accident that they changed it from Department of Housing and Community Development. In other words, let's build a mall, let's build an overlay district, let's get some commerce into the town, to economic, the Department of Housing and Livable Communities. Now, what's livable? They get to define what's livable. That means like no gas ranges. That's livable, all right? Yeah. To have gas ranges is death. That means that's AOC saying in 20 years the world's going to end, right? Or 12 years, she said. Like that. Right. Anyway, so here it is. Here's the report. I know I'm spending too much time on it.
No, it's actually very important.
I've got to say, I'll just read a brief part of it. In accordance with Section 12 of Chapter 11 of the Mass General Laws, the state auditor has conducted the first in a series of performance audits of the EOHLC for the period July 1, 2021 to December 31st, 2023. So 2 full years plus. When designing the audit plan for the emergency no-bid contracts, we extend the audit period to June 30th, 2024. So they had an initial period. They extended the study period to address the issue of no-bid contracts, emergency no-bid contracts, to encompass food and transportation expenditures related to emergency no-bid contracts during that time frame. There's been scores, apparently, of emergency no-bid contracts that have been let out by the state, by EOHLC, and they came up with a list of findings, finding 1 through 5, through finding number, 6. 6 main findings, 6 main categories, and I'll just read you the first one. Category 1, finding 1. EOHLC failed to adequately assess and act upon the increased demand for service, that's migrants, all that kind of stuff, resulting in improper and unlawful emergency procurements for food and transportation services. Did you hear what I said?
Yeah.
Improper, unlawful. This is a state agency. Now, we watch town government, and we found what we feel were illegal contracts being executed, okay? A no-bid contract being pushed by Mike Maresco. And what happened? Ooh, that contract got pulled. Ooh, all those solar contracts that were unauthorized from town meeting got pulled. Ooh, what happened? Will anybody tell us? Crickets, all right? But here it is on a major, on a level of magnitudes greater. Your auditor saying that EOHLC failed and acted improperly and unlawfully. Just let that sink in. And if we and I think further on in this we're going to get some dollar numbers as to what involved. This is a major state agency, branch of government that has such wide-ranging control over your life and your lifestyle and your property. The effect of this unlawful action, these unlawful actions, was by using emergency contracts for such an extended period, EOHLC bypassed. What would happen to you if you bypassed the law, okay? They bypassed established procurement procedures. This resulted in a lack of competitive bidding, transparency, and accountability in the contracting process. I could go on and on for 3 hours.
I want to know what the relationships were between people who work for EOHLC and these contractors. I want to know it all, because it's not okay. They're using our tax money illegally, and then they're telling us that they're doing it to make it so that we have more affordable housing. I don't know about you, but I don't think $2,700 for a 1-bedroom apartment in a building with common entrance and no exterior deck, your second means of egress is back to the same hallway that you're sharing with everybody else. Is that what we want, America? I don't think so.
That's how they want to manage the minions and the unwashed masses, basically. That's what it comes down to. You're being managed. You're just being herded in a certain direction. And some people are getting very rich, obviously. Some people are getting very, very rich. And there's no doubt about it, all right?
It's the poverty.
That's true. There's money to be made. There's money to be made in poverty,
It's
as
like
they say.
San Francisco and their homeless situation that never gets solved.
As a housing commissioner, I look at the contracts and other so-called procurement documents, and I'm always asking, where is this? Where is that? Why is this number so high? Why are we spending $384,000 to build a septic system at one of our properties, and we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to study it before we build that? And then at the same time some people are trying to arrange sweetheart deals to tie in a neighboring condominium complex. We caught that, and thanks to people out there and your assistance and your help and backing me up, we stopped that, okay? This doesn't end. And it's not, like Amy says, you go to town meeting, you pay attention, guess what? Then you save all this money, all right? You support the work that Diana DiZoglio is doing. You save money, okay? You start to clean things up. Why are things so tough right now? Why do we have a lack of basic services? Why is our MBTA so totally in debt and sucking away such a giant percentage of the state budget? Nobody was paying attention. Everybody was going along for the ride, okay? It's like when the Plymouth County Commissioners come to town and they have one of those big giant fake checks, you know, hey, there's another $700,000 for your town, you know? But guess what? That's borrowed money from China. All right, that's money your grandchildren are going to pay back, all right, at some point. But anyway,
Lucky.
What's that?
If we're lucky.
If we're lucky to have grandchildren, number one. Number two, if they're lucky to survive all the crap that they're eating and the education and indoctrination they're undergoing. Anyway, so what I need to move on to now is that with the town meeting coming up, there was another meeting of the advisory board, and I'm going to segue into MBTA, okay, MBTA zoning. The advisory board met last night, and during the advisory board, a question was asked by one of the advisory board members, Ms. Costello. I think she's the mother of Sean Costello, school committee member, and she asked the question, she's thinking, she's thinking, Ms. Costello, you're on.
Do you see the cut in funding from the state, the grant funding, affect, like we were talking earlier about what's going to affect FY27? Do you see some of the grant funding as a result of the MBTA, you know, that issue affecting the budget as well? I mean, we're going to have to make up the money somewhere.
You know, I haven't done an assessment of that in particular. I think it's inherently going to put a stressor on a community if it's a reduction in available funding through grants or otherwise. But I can't put a number on that right now. So.
Now that's a bootleg copy, so sorry about the quality. It's not that good, all right? But here's the point. Marshfield's voters and patriots, which, you know, decided, no, we're not going to play along with this game. We're not going to let the state take over control of our town and its zoning. That is something, hold on, caller. That is zoning of your town is reserved for the voters. If you want to change the zones, you want to create an industrial zone or some kind of commercial zone, a residential zone, that is reserved to the voters of each of the towns in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And what the governor is trying to, and her crew is trying to do now, is to basically take away your control of local zoning, take away your control of the future of your town, your city, okay? And one of the ways they're doing it is through something called MBTA zoning. We don't have to reserve the whole history of MBTA zoning. And initially, under the law that established MBTA zoning, they said if you don't sign up for MBTA zoning, which is to create high-density family districts, multi-unit apartments in a town, then we're going to take away certain grant programs from you. We're not going to let you can apply for grants, but guess what? You're probably not going to get them because there's a small group of them that we're going to withhold from you. It's like the stick, okay? So, what happens? What have they been doing? Towns have not been signing on to MBTA zoning, so what do? They expand the number of programs in so-called grants.
In an emergency. What emergency?
That's right. It's supposed to be an emergency that we need to zone all these areas.
Well, obviously, their emergencies are unlawful.
Right. They're not true emergencies. So what they're doing is they're now threatening to withhold all kinds of grant money from different things. In Marshfield, when we filed as to become recognized as falling within the unfunded mandates, a community that's faced with unfunded mandates, and therefore be excused from MBTA zonings because it has been ruled to be an unfunded mandate by Diana DiZoglio's office of the Department of Unfunded Mandates. So the town did the smart thing finally, after the residents kept hounding and speaking out and speaking out and speaking out. Finally, Lynn Fiddler, who we just threw out of office, and Bob Galvin and the other crew members all said, okay, twist our arms. We're going to file in Superior Court to be recognized to have these unfunded mandates recognized and therefore be excused from MBTA zoning. But in the meantime, even in the complaint that was filed in Superior Court, the town's lawyer said, you know, there's a pending grant for doing some survey and permitting work so we can start dredging in the area of the North-South River, which is crucial to boat traffic, fishing traffic, recreational traffic, and all that. But that grant is now being withheld, and we've been calling them and they won't answer us, even though the grant was already issued prior to them saying we're not in compliance with MBTA zoning, therefore we forfeit all those grants.
Whoa.
So it says right in the lawsuit, it says, hey, you know, we won this grant back in December when we were still technically in compliance. Why hasn't the check been sent to us so we can get going on this dredging, preparing for this dredging project? The state, like, nothing. They wouldn't even pick up the phone and return the call. So this is what's happening is that, now this is a kind of a grant, like they tried to withhold grants for fire departments around the state of Massachusetts, saying if you're not in compliance with MBTA zoning, we're not going to give your fire department a grant that's necessary for training and for safety equipment for your firefighters and your first responders. Can you imagine? What does this have to do with building high-density apartment buildings? Nothing, except that they're using it for leverage and to hit you over the head with a stick. And so now they want to deny money for the town of Marshfield to get going on preparing for a dredging project, which is a safety issue and an issue of producing food for people. Imagine that, they want to take food from you. This is Governor Healy wants to take food and reduce your safety because they want to push an agenda of centralized control of land and housing. So anyway, what happened?
It's a land grab, it's a land steal.
It is, it's a complete land grab.
And can I make one point?
You can make more than one point.
The fire grants, I just think it's very important to know that the fire grants were given. They worked really hard over one weekend, and it is very important to know that those fire grants were given. So don't feel like that's a threat, that you feel like, oh my God, we need to do this, or else you got to stand, because you shouldn't be getting threatened by the Massachusetts governor. This is the United States of America. We fought very hard to be this, and we ran away from Britain, from King George, because he was demanding all these things, and we fought really hard to be here. We can't just give up. And I have a question. How much?
Where else are you going to go?
Is that Ken on the phone?
No.
Oh, okay. So here's the thing with the fire grants, though. Duxbury has a fire chief who I think led this. He used to work in TV news, and he got it on Channel 5 News, and he embarrassed the governor, and the governor had to back down. And apparently she does not want to be in that position again. And so the real serious safety grants, fire, police, are now off the table, even if they're officially banned, according to Ken Sweezy, our representative for Marshfield, Duxbury, Hanson, and Pembroke.
And that's where I want to lead to right now.
And Halifax.
Christine Hill has written a story. That's why I'm saying go to Duxbury Substack. Ken Sweezy dispels worries over grants. Christine, what happened when you talked to Ken? What did you learn?
I learned that we're not going to lose the safety grants, okay? They're not going to threaten education. That would be a no-go. But what I learned was bigger than that. Oh, I learned also, if you've signed the paperwork for your grant, and so you've signed a contract between you and the state, then they cannot take the grant away. So what happened in Marshfield is they awarded the grant in December, but then they wouldn't pick up the phone and they never signed the paperwork. And so therefore they pulled it and they were doing that because they didn't think Marshfield was going to comply with the rules. So that's why Marshfield lost its grant. But if you already have a grant, you don't have to worry about it being pulled if you have a contract signed. And there's a lot of misinformation out there in the MBTA community's supporters where they're saying you're going to lose all these grants. But the bigger point is that the governor is vulnerable, okay? She's vulnerable to somebody doing something like what Chief Reardon and some of the other fire chiefs did, where they just embarrassed her. Like the North River does not have a safe entrance. into the ocean. Everybody knows that there's a couple places where you can capsize and drown. So it's very much a safety grant, and it should be awarded. There's also a sidewalk grant in Duxbury that might be taken away if Duxbury doesn't pass the zoning. I'm not sure what the status of that grant is. The select board and the town are very hesitant to tell us the status of these grants. But the thing is, if you go and you fight for your grant, I think there's a good chance that the governor will back down, especially with something like the North River, where the North River is so unsafe. And I think I was trying to count, there's a marina in Situate, there's one up in Hanover, I think there's the Marshfield Yacht Club and 2 marinas on the South River, all of which are on that same entrance to the from the ocean. So I think that you have a very, very good case that it's a safety grant, and that they're basically threatening people's livelihoods who have nothing to do with this. Situate has nothing to do with this.
Well, the rivers are liquid water, liquid roadways.
They're liquid roadways, and do you want somebody to be killed? Do you want somebody to be drowned? Do you want the harbor master not to be able to get to somebody in time because you're mad about somebody won't zone the way you want to be zoned? It seems ridiculous.
We have a caller that might have a comment on this. Caller, do you have something to say, add on to this?
Well, not the same direction you're going, Joe.
Okay, well then, do you want to
I just want to say that grants are a double-edged sword, you know. So certainly the grants to do dredging is something we have to do, and it pays for a lot of it, right?
Right.
However, there's a double-edged sword to getting grants and how they affect the budget. When you, like, I'm not picking on the harbor master here. I just want to say, like, okay, so we just got a grant for a new $800,000 harbor master boat, right? But now we got to pay $200,000 to outfit it with electronics. So now that's coming out of the budget. That's coming out of the general fund. So sometimes grants cost us money,
Yes.
and we end up getting, thinking, okay, well, this is a free deal, so let's get it, even though we might not need it. But then it's going to cost us money on the other end anyway. And that happens, like with the Harbor Master building, for instance. You got a $2 or $3 million building. Now you got to maintain it, man it, and heat it, and it's not just. I'm not picking on the Harbor Master. It was an easy example to say because I'm right here and see it.
What's the other thing that grants do? They create jobs.
Do they?
And what do jobs do? Jobs create political power
And money.
and money for people.
Well, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And then the other comment I had, which is not as off topic of what you're talking about, but I just wanted to say after watching the joint meeting last night of the Selectmen and the Advisory Board. So, at first when I heard, okay, we're going to finds the money in the budget for the 700 and whatever it is, 49,000. I think it's 749,000 that we owe South Shore Rotec for tuition. But I was, in the beginning, it was like, okay, we're going to delay a lot of the things that we're going to get, that we're going to pay for into next year or the year after, so that we can pay what we owe South Shore Rotec. But then it turns out there's very little delay. Most of the money they to raise that $749,000 come from looking at the budget a little bit closer and saying, "Oh, we don't need this stuff really."
No,
Imagine if we went through every line item in every department in this town, especially the schools, and did that. The amount of money of waste there is in a $120 million budget, and they saved what? They saved $750,000 out of, I don't know, what was the free cash allotment? I forget what it was, a couple million or something. So,
well, there was always plenty.
a lot of money being spent that doesn't need to be spent. That's all I got to say. I don't think we have a revenue problem. I think we have a spending problem, and we definitely have to do something about it.
Thank you. We're going to talk more about what happened to overrides around the area too, which is directly related to what you just mentioned.
Okay, I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, and also what the caller didn't mention was that the police department now says they don't need the $300,000 or $400,000+ that they originally had in the budget. for like new tasers and for training and accreditation, just like that. And we knew from day one in discussing the budget for this town meeting that there was going to be $900,000 put into what they call the reserve fund, which is like taking free cash and putting it into free cash. And on top of that, there was like another $400,000 to $700,000 coming back from immediate reimbursements. So we figured there was already over $2 million of cash available, of which $749,000 could be used to pay the student assessments for Marshfield for South Shore Voc Tech. So to me, there was never really a fundamental lack or a need to search for money. It was always there. So why did they create this? I think it's kind of a phony budget crisis.
Want me to tell you?
And I think it covered Maresco's exit. Go ahead.
Because we don't go to town meeting and protect our wallets and protect the taxes that go on our homes.
Yep.
If we went to town meeting, then they wouldn't be able to just spend our money like this, because your taxes go up whenever they spend more money. You got to just go.
Yeah, that's right. And
It's
you can't be afraid. Like when I got up at town meeting a year and a half ago and I said, the police department wants $250,000, okay, for what? It just was like a $250,000. For what?
And Christine, didn't this happen in Duxbury?
Yes, I have to say, we had okay, so it happened in Duxbury. We defeated the override, and now there's a couple things that happened. First of all, the town manager and the finance committee took over the select board's job. So the select board was shut out of the budget, and the town
that's
manager told them that they couldn't amend the budget. So we ended up on our austerity 2.5% budget. We ended up cutting 2 police and 2 fire positions when there was plenty of money elsewhere in the budget to cut. And so now we're having a citizen's petition to take money from our stabilization fund and to fund those positions, with the idea that next year we're going to cut from elsewhere in the budget. But what is so interesting is now the select board is a little bit back in charge of the budget, because I wrote several articles where I told them what was in the Town Manager Act, and the Town Manager Act gave them powers over the budget that they apparently were not aware of because they hadn't read it. And so now the select board's in charge, but you just don't need to go to town meeting. You have to get people in your community to run, and you have to have competitive elections, and they need to be people who are going to fight for you, because otherwise you end up with what happened at our meeting on Monday, where we had the clerk of the select board, Fernando Guitard, saying that we had to engage the community in a discussion about how we could not have an austerity budget or a 2.5% budget without decreasing services. That's just not true. There's so many smart people in Duxbury who have ideas about how to cut the budget. The people on the select board do not have these ideas, and they just go along with the town manager. They're friends with the human resources department. They're friends with finance department. They don't want to rock the boat, and so they're unimaginative, and they try to just force their view on people. And then also they spend, if you don't mind me saying so, part of the meeting complaining about me, writing that there were other ways to cut the budget.
Well, that means you're doing something right.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't mention me, but there was like, and then.
Well, anybody that speaks up, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I was told to my face in a meeting, you're engaging in misinformation.
Yeah.
Whether it was the train HVAC contract years ago that was, and the investigation for that was spearheaded by Pam Keith, or whether it was the roofing contract that I dug into. How many times, ooh, you're engaging in misinformation. Ooh, everything you have to say is not germane to the discussion. Ooh, you got up at town meeting 26 times.
Apparently they're counting.
They are. They actually are.
Did they call you divisive?
Divisive, yes.
Divisive.
Misinformation,
Yeah.
disinformation. All it's like a playbook that they all share.
Yeah.
And you see it in Duxbury, you see it in every other town around.
Oh yeah, I definitely see it on the planning board.
Yeah, no,
I see it
well,
at town meeting.
We saw the clip last week of of Amy being chastised in abstention, not even to her face, saying that, you know, she has in her mind, she said about MBTA zoning, we need someone who's more open-minded. What?
Yeah.
So there's another thing, you're not open-minded enough. You're just not, whatever, you know?
Because I don't want MBTA housing, and then 722 people showed up to town meeting and said they didn't want it. So I guess that's why
Right.
they elected me, right?
Son of a gun. Gee whiz.
What was the vote?
700 to 12. Some people had left before we voted. I mean, like, really.
Some people that said, I think we got this, we can leave, right? Yeah, well, I mean, hang in there. But anyway, can we segue into what happened with, speaking of elections? Can we do that? You ready
Yeah.
to do that? Okay. Speaking of elections and stuff like, and things like that, okay? What happened this last weekend? Uh-oh. Ooh, eek. WATD covered it this way. WATD election results. 11 South Shore towns held their annual elections Saturday. 5 of those towns, Norwell, Hanover, Hanson, Whitman, and Plimpton, had overrides. Of those 5 towns, guess how many overrides passed? One, Hanover. And Hanover had a very organized, established pro-override group. They were, talk about scare tactics, they were saying the police station would be closed most of the
my
time.
God.
Fire station was going to be closed most of the time. You're going to have to wait. You're going to take a number, like at the deli counter, to get an ambulance. The schools were going to lose their teachers. I mean, it just was across the board. Emmanuel Doctor, who ran for state rep and was roundly defeated because he's even too liberal for Hanover, wrote this like 6-paragraph letter. It was Armageddon. It was the apocalypse. You know, it was everything. And they were well organized. They were very well organized, and they were established because they had an override attempt before. It was the only town where the override passed. Every place else, it failed. It was shot down. Like in Marshfield. Now, one thing they didn't mention was Marshfield we shot down an override, but that's a little different. That's a debt exclusion. Well, that's a debt exclusion override, and we will revisit that. And that's what we just talked about. Money for South Shore Voc-Tech. There we go. There was a South Shore Voc-Tech debt exclusion override. All that was for was how do we start paying for our share of the new building construction, our share of the cost of the new building construction. And what the voters are saying in all these towns, like they said in Duxbury earlier this year, we want you to look more closely at the budget and at the revenues and at what you're holding in reserve right now. That's all they're saying. We want people to stop being, as Christine just described. Basically, you're saying they're lazy. You know, it used to always be you go into a select board meeting and the administrator would go, oh, you guys are doing, oh, everybody's wonderful. You're doing a great job. We just got another reward for doing something so thoroughly. And then the select board would say, oh, our town administrator is doing a wonderful job. Thank you for that wonderful report. You're doing a great job. It's one hand washing the other, back and forth, back and forth. And then you finally get a guy like, or an active citizen get in and start asking questions. Or you get a guy like Eric Kelly elected, who starts to say, well, wait a minute now. Let's talk about this. And he doesn't talk about it behind closed doors with the town council, like was always the practice. He talks about it out in the open. Okay, so you're getting some learning along the way. In Norwell, the $3.7 million budget override failed by 134 votes. They also had a South Shore Voc-Tech override that was approved. Okay, so it's not the South Shore Voc-Tech vote has nothing to do with being for or against vocational education. The Whitman $2 million override, Plimpton's override for a new fire station was defeated. Obviously, they want to look at the costs again. In the Plymouth Select Board race, now here's where things kind of go downhill.
Yeah.
All right. If you look at Plymouth Select Board race, the newcomers, Kilhan or Cohan and Deb Yaquinto defeated the incumbents Mahoney and Bletzer. Now, that's not always a bad thing that an incumbent gets put out. That's sometimes a good sign that people are restless. I don't know enough about that detail, okay? Let's see, going down the race, well, let's look at Pembroke and Hanover, first of all. Pembroke and Hanover, let's focus on that. There's a whole list of upsets, and in Pembroke in particular, Steve Cicchiotti was running, he's the incumbent, and he lost by 196 votes. What happened in Pembroke? Well, one thing that we know happened in Pembroke was that Steve Cicchiotti got together with 4 other candidates for other offices, and they put their names on a piece of paper as a slate. And that slate included people, let's say, were not shy about expressing themselves over certain social issues. What do you know about that?
Okay, so I wrote a story, Red Wave Crashes in Duxbury, in Pembroke,
Here it is right here.
because,
Marshfield, here it is. Duxbury Substack, Red Wave Crashes in Pembroke.
Great.
because in the past few months, the people in Pembroke have been talking about how proud they are that they've taken over most of the government boards in Pembroke, because they basically, people who were common sense or a little bit to the right of the center started running for office. But what happened this time is they had all these issues all together in a way that was not pleasant to the electorate. So for poor Steve Cicchiotti, he ran a race that was focused on nuts and
A very
bolts.
moderate candidate.
Yeah, nuts and bolts issues.
Yeah.
But he got caught in the slate, and there was a candidates forum where he was asked about was he pro DEI or anti DEI in the town of Pembroke, and did he think the pride flag was political? And so he said he thought the pride flag was political, and that he didn't want to reintroduce DEI, which has been removed from the town of Pembroke, back into the town of Pembroke. So that associated him with all the other candidates. So then Maureen Jacey for the Board of Health, who's a lovely person, very lovely person, she decided to go for a fluoride ban in the water. And there are some open questions about fluoride that are very complicated and involve things like how much fluoride is in the water. And it was probably, I like Maureen, but it was probably not the best idea to do this at a local level right now, especially with all the other issues going on, and especially since the federal government with RFK Jr. is taking care of this issue. Then a citizen, I don't know who it is, decided that they were going to put on the town meeting warrant a citizen's petition to allow plastic bags back in Pembroke. You know, it just gins up everybody and is associated with all these right-coded issues. Then Paige Graziano, she was running for school committee, and there are people, it's very understandable over in Pembroke, who are concerned that their kids are going into school and they're transitioning in school and their parents aren't being told about it. So that it just frightens people to death that this is going on. I mean, to be quite frank, from what they've told me, they're afraid that nobody's going to tell them, and then their children are going to end up with damage to their bodies that's irreversible.
Well, and they're hearing that kind of story on national media, where in some states, children are being transitioned without the parents being informed.
Right.
At least that's the anecdote.
Well, there's bills right now that are going to try and promote that in the state
Yeah.
of Massachusetts.
Yep.
And I have heard stories in Halifax where actually a little girl went to school. She had been homeschooled most of the time, and she wanted to be called a boy's name at school, and her parents tried to like step in and do something about it. And then, what is it, DCFS or they got involved. So it does get bad here.
Yeah, and so Graziano, Paige, she was talking about this, and she made a video in which she was talking very nicely about the issue, and then she basically said, she talked about how she didn't want the pride flag in the schools, which is a little bit broad for the trans issue. And then she said, she talked about an LGBTQ agenda, and then she talked about how having boys who are transitioning into being women in the girls' locker room was evil, and she said it in a really intense way that I think frightened people. Because, these are very delicate issues, especially when you're dealing with kids. And I think just bringing up the idea of somebody else who's probably trying to do the right thing, as much as you may disagree with it, and calling them evil is not productive. At the same time, she wanted to ban, she wanted to make it so that you could make it safer. There's Massachusetts laws that allow boys to play in girls' sports if there's no equivalent sport for the boys, and the reverse. So she wanted it to make it so that you could not sacrifice, what is it? Forfeit the game. Forfeit the game.
Without a penalty.
Without a penalty. If you didn't want it, like let's say there's a giant boy playing girls field hockey and you're afraid you're going to get hurt, then you could forfeit the game. So it was just a lot of issues all at once, a lot of social issues, and so I think that's why they lost.
I have a little bit more
Knowing that other schools, when she's competing, not all of them will have a girl in her weight class for her to wrestle against, but that her coach has the freedom to say the person who's in her weight class is not really the best person for her to be wrestling.
I think
they're not, even though they're matched by weight, they're not necessarily the best match by skill, by size, by muscle mass, for example. And there's a danger there to Cora, and I'm not going to have her participate. Cora can also say the same thing. I'm not comfortable with this match. I'm not going to do it. And that's wonderful. And it works the opposite way, too.
That's Paige Graziano,
Yeah. So you had something
candidate
else?
for school committee.
Yeah, so I feel as
In
though,
Pembroke.
so behind the other side is the Coletta Cutler crew.
Right, and nobody wants her to be elected to anything.
So really, there was a lot of push behind that. And then the Keegan, who won, his wife is a realtor in town. So they used a lot of marketing, they used a lot of that, and also a ton of help from Becky Coletta.
Yeah, but I mean, help from Becky Coletta. Becky Coletta, when she ran for the State House, got an enormously low amount of votes in Pembroke
Yes.
and in Duxbury.
Yes, but when you go back to the social issues,
Right.
there's a lot of she could dig in deep on that.
Right.
So that was a piece of it, because it was it's stated, I think Carrie McRae said it, a lot of people are really mad after the 2024 presidential and state elections that they really came out in force. And
Right.
I think there's a couple of things going on here. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think like my advice to candidates would be to avoid social issues. And if you're going to go with one of these right-coded issues and you're going to run as the slate, just choose one of them. Like not wanting to, like a small girl not wanting to play with a giant boy in field hockey. That makes sense, and you can do it without bringing in any LGBTQ goals.
Yep.
So if you want to do that, just do that, but don't bring 6 other issues in at the same time.
Yeah, because I'm the basis that be what you want to be.
Right.
I don't like transitioning in school, but that gets all crazy. But
Yeah.
we're a free country.
Right.
Nobody's against.
Yeah.
Do what you need to do. Like, be who you are. You know?
Right. But
There are some hills to die on.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I don't want to see litter boxes in the schools, all right? That's enough.
Yeah.
We can't go there.
Right.
But at the same time, you have to accept the reality that, it takes all types, basically. And I don't mean to be glib about it, but it's true. And to then wave issues into people's faces, what does it do? It gets the opposition energized. There's better ways to manage these campaigns.
Yeah.
And without energizing them. I mean, conservatives were agitated the way some people were acting in Marshfield, and a lot of liberal or people on the left side of the spectrum were agitated mainly by rumors and accusations of what some of the candidates, particularly Trish Simpson, stood for. Mm-hmm. Trish Simpson is not a MAGA zombie.
No.
All right, good gracious. I mean, she's a member of the Mass Teachers Association. I supported her, and I think there's going to be good things coming with Trish Simpson over the next few years.
I agree.
But there's a better way of handling some of these issues, okay? And there's a better way of letting people kind of live their own lives, you know? And I mean, personally, I'm socially and financially or economically conservative person, you know, but you know, I'm not gonna put it in your face unless you ask me to. Whatever.
Yeah, and don't call people evil.
Yeah, that. I mean, you can talk about that amongst yourselves or in your own networking groups or clubs and stuff like that. And yeah, there is definitely evil in the world today. There's no doubt about it. And the thing about evil, as we all know, the old cliche is that the devil's greatest trick is convincing you that he does not exist. So in other words, you can't ignore it. You have to take action in your own life and by how you live, but you don't go around in a campaign and deliberately try to poke and agitate people over it. And I think that's what happened in some of these races.
Actually, in Halifax, the people who won did do evil. They posted Save Halifax, Mass. And they went after this guy who ran for selectman, Gordon C. Andrews. He sued in 2017 the town of Halifax because they used a 74-foot piece of frontage and put a street in. In the town of Halifax, you need 150 feet of frontage. So he sued. So everybody gets mad because he sued the town. But here's the thing. If you actually look at the Zoning Board of Appeals meetings, then you'll see that our town council stated that the building permits were invalid, and our Zoning Board of Appeals chose to make the citizen fight. So he had to, because so you have 74 feet of frontage next to your house, and now you have a street going there. That would have only been an estate lot in the town of Halifax. That's it. That's it. You didn't have frontage. So he did win a lot of the lawsuits, but there are people who use our town as a real estate ring, and they have certain people in different boards to make sure that it all occurs. And so he did lose to what I would say is the wrong side.
Put some developers and lumber salesmen on a zoning board. What can go wrong, really, you know? I mean, that's why you need a broad range of membership on all the various boards and committees so that it represents the true sentiment and the true background and knowledge base of the entire community. Mm-hmm. And hopefully that's the one of the biggest changes we're going to see in Marshfield in the months coming up, like real soon. Mm-hmm. We're going to see more diversity. I also heard stories that the races in Pembroke and Hanover were particularly nasty and dirty. There was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. I mean, almost to the point of literally like throwing eggs at people's houses. And also,
really?
There was stuff going on. Well, the thing I heard more about was that there was sort of anonymous phone calls to employers, accusations like people's involvement with other people. Personal stuff, personal and employment related stuff.
Was this in Pembroke?
Pembroke and Hanover.
Because the Cutler's campaigns in Duxbury have been particularly nasty.
Smear campaigns.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been a smear campaign against me by people in the Republican Party. They're saying that I'm trying to destroy the Republican Party, you know, which should gain me good favor with the Democrats in town. But I'm sorry, it's not true, you know. So there's like phone calls, you know, that person is, did you know about this? Did you know about that? That kind of stuff. And it's even going on in Marshfield right now. And I can't talk about it. But it's nasty stuff. Mm-hmm. A lot of money being spent, a lot of capital being invested, let's say, in order to maintain power. For what reason? Like you said, Amy, somebody's cashing in.
Yep, somebody is.
Somebody's cashing in, and they're gonna what, retire to Florida, and with satisfaction that they destroyed our beautiful town. And look at Halifax, places like Halifax and Plimpton, that are like right on the edge now, or on the cusp of possibly turning into what we call Shitsville. you need people to step up now.
Yep.
And to protect it, and
You
protect
can't
that way of
overbuild.
life.
We have water problems. I mean, the water bans start on May 1st. We clearly have water problems in Halifax. There's lead issues at the at the Halifax Elementary School. You know, we're using $20,000 more a year in chemicals, and this is per the superintendent of Halifax at town meeting. And then one of the commissioners got up and said I was lying, but it's definitely not true. Meaning there's a problem with water. I'm not lying. There's black gel on our drains there that collects, and it's gross. It turns your tiles. What do you think it does to your body? What do you think it does?
And that could be a biological thing too. It could be some kind of biological growth.
Huh. Oh, thanks.
So you sleep better tonight, you know?
Yeah, right. Well, I'm thinking it might be something like that.
But the bottom line is that you're seeing changes and you're seeing adjustments because people are getting involved. And we're really lucky and glad in Marshfield to sort of be leading the way to opening up the transparency. I can tell you folks that Marshfield is the subject of conversation in the towns around us. And Duxbury too. Duxbury has made some great stands. And that word is getting around, and it is encouraging, and it's an inspiration. So keep up the good work, you know, that's all I can say. Speaking of water, we don't have time to get into it, but another dynamite article by Christine Hill that just came out. The climate emergency returns as a resiliency action. The climate does that mean it's being repackaged? Is it more of an anachronism to say?
There's a coastal resiliency group in Duxbury, and they felt like nobody was paying attention to them, so they wanted to declare an emergency, a climate emergency in Duxbury.
That always works.
And so they ended up tying us to this crazy decarbonization plan for the state, and even the people who were supporting it on the select board didn't know about it. So they were very upset with me for writing about what was in the decarbonization plan that they endorsed.
Really?
They're like, we're not for windmills, we're not for transit-oriented housing, but it's right there in the report that they endorsed.
So they
Did they
want to
read
pass.
it?
I don't think so.
They
So
wanna-
that's what I love to ask people all the
Yeah.
time, like, have you read this? And most of the time is no, or I skimmed it.
Yeah.
McGee, who's McGee? Mike McGee.
Mike McGee, he stood up and said that he didn't feel comfortable supporting it because he didn't want to bind the town to it. But
So out of your 5 selectmen, one of them stood up and said, wait a minute, if we do this, and I think the quote that you provided is that the resolution would bind future select boards to follow policies that the town cannot afford, or that maybe the town voters really are not in favor of. Oh, what a novel idea, you know?
yeah, there's lost a lot in that report about social equity. Like, I
Yeah.
mean,
Why
what does
is
the
that in the
climate have to
climate?
do with social equity, and why are we signing up for that?
Yeah.
Another show topic.
It's a big one because if you get into stretch code, like I'm really nervous about the South Shore Votech being taken down with stretch code, because if we can't build new houses that have gas or oil with the grants that people are going to be using to rebuild this, or even the laws, are we going to be able to put the oil and gas teaching back in there?
A resolution to undertake climate resiliency action. Resolutions and proclamations. Does that sound familiar to you folks?
Yes, and I need to remind everybody, June 2nd, you have town meeting in Marshfield.
That's right. Maybe Amy will come and visit
Maybe I should.
and inspire us. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Christine. Thank you, Amy. Thank you for our production guy, Dave. We'll see you on the street. Be sure to say hello.
And Heather.
Have a wonderful Memorial Day.